Okay, hello. This is Jimmy Pettit's SD to TPDD code in action. So for a TRS-80 Model 100, there used to be a device you could buy called a NADS-BOX, New Age Digital Storage Box, and Jimmy Pettit wrote ported some. Well, I don't know if he ported an existing thing or wrote new code from scratch, but he implemented a portable, the same protocol as a Tandy Portable Disk Drive, one of these, in Arduino to run on a microcontroller. And this is, I've taken that code and modified it slightly to work on a Teensy 3.6 or 3.5. Teensy 3.5 and 3.6 are two very similar. They're microcontroller boards that are Arduino compatible, and what's notable about them is that it has an SD card reader built in, USB input built in, and in the case of this one also the Teensy 3.6, and they also have RTC, real-time clock, built in. So basically, all that's required now to make a new NADS-BOX for yourself is his code. Maybe my modified code, but basically it's his code. I didn't really change anything about the protocol itself. I dinked around with some other stuff, just changes that don't matter, just so that for my own, indenting and comments and things, I was trying to experiment with it. But about the only thing I did that mattered is, changing how the SD FAT library is used to use the card reader on the Teensy. There's a special version, there's a special interface for that that's a little more efficient. So, and I added low power calls so that this shuts itself off in between when it's waiting for serial events. And so you can make yourself one of these with essentially almost no soldering or anything. This may look slightly complicated, but really all you need is that and that. This cable here is cables to go 03019 is basically the perfect cable for connecting to a computer, to a PC, without any adapters. So that's why there's adapters here, is because this module basically is set up for DTE, to act like a device, not like a host. So because of the peculiar wiring of the Tandy Model 100, where it's got a female plug, but it's wired DTE. DTE is like a host, DCE is like a device. Sorry, I got that wrong. It's wired DTE like a computer, like a host, but it's got a female plug, which is unusual. So most cables you buy won't have, if they have a male plug, a male 25-pin plug, then they're probably for a modem, and they'll have the wrong wiring. They won't do no modem inside. So this cable happens to be right. It's got a male plug on male 25-pin plug on one side, and a female 25-pin 9-pin plug on the other side, which is what would plug into a computer. All PCs will have a 9-pin male plug, and does null modem, is wired null modem inside, and has full handshaking, so it does all the RTS, CTS, and DTR. So because this cable is perfect for connecting to a PC, and this module basically is the opposite of a PC. It's meant to be like a device, so you would hook a PC up to this. This is also meant to basically to hook up to a PC with like a straight pass-through cable. If you end up needing a gender changer and a null modem adapter. But get this in here. One-handed is a little hard. So, rigging up a serial connection isn't that hard. I think if you just had a modem cable, like a 9 to 25 pin cable that would come with a modem, which is a far more common cable, then that would be the right kind of cable to connect right over to this with no adapters. It would have the right pins, and that's my meter telling me I talked too long. So anyways, getting past that, this module is, you can buy it right off the shelf or off the online. It's a RS-232 level shifter, and it takes 3.3 to 5 volt signals from, you know, a CMOS or a TTL device and translates it to RS-232 levels, which is plus or minus 12 volts. Oh, you know what? I just realized there is one soldering that needed to be done on here. And you can do it here like I did, or you can do it in the connector, or if you make a new cable, if you make a cable yourself, do it in the cable. But if you look at this, here's another copy of that same module. You see these three things here, these three pinholes, and you see how there's silkscreen that looks like they have lines in between them to kind of visually join them. Same as this two here, these two here, they are sort of visually joined. These two pins here are RTS and CTS, and they're not jumpered, but this indicates that you might want to jumper them because sometimes you want RTS and CTS self-satisfied. Like just short it out so that it's fake RTS, fake hardware flow control. Well, these three here are I don't remember which is which, but they're DSR, DTR, and DCD, which are commonly joined in serial ports, just to fake them out. And so instead of passing the signal to the other end of the wire, they're just jumpered on each end, and those three pins usually are often jumpered together. And so on this module, as it comes, there are no pins for DTR and DSR, but TS-DOS requires DTR and DSR. TS-DOS in a Model 100 looks for the DTR and DSR, and if it's not shorted out, or if it's not actually connected to the other device and controlled by the other device, TS-DOS will just give an error saying that the drive is not ready. So when you plug the proper official cable into an actual Tandy Portable Disk Drive, that DTR signal goes, I don't know, high or low, I don't know which way it goes, but TS-DOS sees it, and that's how it detects that the drive is connected. So there's no pins for DSR and DTR on this module, but they do have those three little they do have them sort of made where it's almost, you know, it's almost ready to go. Like, they're not identified as DTR, DSR, and DCD, but you can see how they got the silk screen to kind of visually connect them, like, hey, you might want to join these, and in fact that's what you do. Short all three of those together, and that connects DTR, DSR, and DCD. And on this module I did that. So that's part of the equation for making this work. I forgot to say that. So, you know, when you have some other module, there's other similar little modules that oh, that's not one. I don't have any other ones right now. I just have two of these. It's just something you got to do. A lot of times you do it right in the plug. Like if you're going to make your own plug, you could just short those in the plug. So anyways, getting past that, the hookup is very simple. You just have power. This module needs anywhere from 3 to 5 volts. So the I/O pins on a Teensy 3.6 are documented not to be 5 volt tolerant. So although I think the serial ports might be, but just to play it safe, this module works for anywhere from 3 volts up. So if you only supply the module with 3.3 volts, then it will only make 3.3 volts on the signals. So I'm drawing power from the Teensy itself. This pin here is one of the, there's 2 or 3 pins scattered around the Teensy that provide 3.3 volts. So the Teensy gets power in from the USB port or from this pin here. I'll get into that later. And then the Teensy can take in, 6 volt, 3 to 6 volts, right? USB port generally provides about 5.1. Teensy has a voltage regulator. It supplies 3.3 volts. They document 250 milliamps just to be safe, but the voltage regulator on there actually can go somewhat higher. There's just a problem with heat sinking on that voltage regulator. So if you stay around 250, 300 milliamps draw, you're fine. So this is a 3.3 volt supply pin from the Teensy over to here, and then this one over here is a ground. I'm connecting to the ground, and then I've got another ground over here. So I'm taking it from this ground pin to provide this ground rail here. Both of these positive rails are coming from this right here. So these 2 wires here coming from this positive and negative power rails are getting 3.3 volts from the Teensy itself. And this here is just a battery I wired up for the real-time clock. There's an RTC built into the Teensy, meaning it has the real-time clock chip and the crystal, but it still just needs a battery, a coin cell, to make it run when you don't have any other power. So the coin cell only runs the real-time clock and only when it's not getting some other power. So this one coin cell would last it for like, somebody, like whatever, 10 years, something crazy like that. So you put it in your box, when you package this all up in a box, in a little project case or something, just stick that in there and forget about it. You don't have to worry about changing it all the time. It'll be years and years. I'm not currently using our real-time clock yet. I've wired it up, but I haven't incorporated it into the Teensy code, into the code yet. This over here is just a reset button. You don't need that. I'm providing power from this lithium, this tiny little LiPo cell. It's a little 150 milliamp LiPo cell. It's meant for drones usually. That little cell will run this thing for, I don't know how many hours yet, many hours, because you'll see later. It's a 150 milliamp cell, provides, I think it's supposed to be providing 3.6 or 7 volts. But it's actually doing more like 3.9. So I turn this on. Yeah, 3.8 volts. So it's within range. But you can power this. You don't need this to power it. So if you were to make yourself one of these, you wouldn't need to do. This is all almost all just off the shelf and stick a couple of wires together. No real electronics, because everything's already built into this, and you don't even need to hook up a battery pack or anything, because it can run off of the USB port, which means the USB port can run off of just a regular old USB battery pack. Powers it just fine. So that's just something you just buy and plug in. No soldering there. Like that's running right now. So I just have the LiPo, set up just for giggles. So, and actually you don't even need that. There's even a neater, smaller, LiPo charger module, because you don't need the USB input, because you have one here. So if you were to package this all up into a little box, I would try to use power from this USB port. I would use power from this USB port into a little module like this. Let's see if I can get this. Focus. I'm not going to say it the way AVE does. So yeah, this is even smaller and neater, and because you could take power from this USB port you already have, so that your box only has one USB plug in it. You know, there's no need to have a separate one just for power. So, but I burned this out, so this is my fallback one. Basically does the same thing. So yeah, so now let's use it. Actually, let's turn it on. Alright, so it's running right now. When I first turn it on, you see the serial port gets a slight activity for a second. And this is freshly reset. You see it's a 32K machine. You know, I just reset a second ago. I can't do it with one hand, so I did it before I put the camera on. So I have a Rex installed. So I'm going to load up Rex Manager, and as you see, Rex comes up by default with among whatever ROMs I have installed on the Rex. By default, it comes up, you know, loading with TS-DOS is the ROM that's in play, in effect. So now if I go back into BASIC and do the same command again, before, the first time I called that, I was accessing Rex. Now Rex is running and has hooked its, you know, has basically it is providing TS-DOS ROM. When I run this again, now I'll be accessing TS-DOS ROM, not Rex. So this is TS-DOS. All right. So alright, the Teensy module is on, and I have code in the Arduino code to blink the LED during SD card activity. So the LED is right about there, and oh yeah, I don't have an SD card plugged in yet. So this is the SD card, normal FAT file system. You just load up the card with files and directories at will. The only thing special to make note of is to keep the file names compatible with the Model 100. So in order for the directories to look the best in TS-DOS, keep the directory names 6 characters or less. If you can make them larger, they'll still work. They'll just be chopped off. So keep the file names 6.2. You know, the extensions matter, you know, because it won't load a file that's of an invalid file name. Like, you can't just have any old extension. So if it's a text document, it should be DO. You know, if it's a binary, it should be CO. And if it's a tokenized BASIC file, it should be BA. But when you download BASIC files online, they're often named .ba, but they're not actually tokenized BASIC files. They're the ASCII version of the BASIC file. You know, so I've loaded up several BASIC files from repositories online, and I renamed them .do because they're all text files. They're all readable. They're all readable right here as plain text, which means if I name them .ba, it's a long story. One-handed. So see, if this is a tokenized BASIC file, this would all be gibberish. So since I can read it, I have to rename it .do so that I can load it into BASIC and then tokenize it. Then I can save it as .ba. So anyways, that's a typical, you know, SD card, you know, with just throw some files on there, normal FAT file system. Alright, let me eject it. Okay. Cut power to the Teensy. Actually, I could have just stuck this in because among the little modifications I made, when you power it on, if there's no SD card, it'll just keep waiting and checking for an SD card every second until it sees one. So, but it's not really working that great yet. It doesn't handle. That's the only situation it handles gracefully is when you first power it on and there's no card, and then you can insert a card later. If you remove the card later and try to put it back in, it doesn't always work. So that's stuff I'll have to work on in the future. Okay. So now all I gotta do is just turn it on. Alright, so now we just try to use it. So I'll just hit F4. I'm in TS-DOS already. I'll just hit F4 to load. I'm going to back up so you can see the drive light. When I do this, as soon as I make activity on the serial port, there's a light in the module that will go for transmit and receive, and then there's a light on the Teensy, and that light on the Teensy is being controlled by the program, and I have it set to turn on and off whenever the SD card is accessed. So let's see, F4 load. That's it. So those are the files from that SD card. And the directories work. See, there's that directory. I can go into it. Oh, I forgot to. And go into another directory even further. Alright, go back up to the parent. Back up to the root. When you're at the root, there's a little name that shows up in the corner here, which I have it saying TeensyPDD. You only have 6 characters to work with. You can change that in the code to make it say whatever you want, but it can only be 6 characters. But you go down into a directory, it goes away. So, oh, it did before. Maybe it's just temporary. I must have never noticed. Never mind. So that string is always there. Now, that should really be like a volume name for the SD card, but I don't have it doing that right now. It's just, it always says the same thing. So anyways, yeah, and transferring files works. Well, let's go into the games directory and load a file. Oh, I keep cutting off the Teensy. You don't see the drive light. And let's load this file here, Foxfighter. Doo-doo-doo. Oh. What's wrong? Oh, I wasn't pressing F1, I was pressing brake. Okay. Load. Load as, just hit enter. There it goes. And now I have it. If I switch back to the RAM, there it is, Foxfight. I don't know why why can't I load it? Should be loadable. With, oh, I'm in TS-DOS still. F8, get out of TS-DOS. Now I can load it. Okay. Go back to TS-DOS. Switch to the disk. See, just a split second, and now here's the really cool part. This little battery will actually be enough to run it for. I haven't calculated, but watch this. All right, so that's voltage right now. Let's let's measure the milliamps. So I'll put my meter in place of that power switch that was there. Put the meter over to milliamps. And nope, I'm not drawing anything. Something's wrong here. Oh, yeah. Put the meter into the current. So that I have low power code in here where in between serial events, basically in between it, at the beginning of every iteration of the loop function in Arduino. Every Arduino program has a function, has the main loop is called loop. At the beginning of it, I have a sleep command. So it's not, the low power is not working perfectly, but it's close. So what's happening is right now, without the low power instructions, without the sleep instruction, normally this code, the machine idle, this whole kit will idle at about 18 milliamps, which is already really good. 18 milliamps at 3.8 volts. That's just not very much. That's pretty good already, right? Because I have that's if I compile this with the minimum amount of code with the compile settings in the Arduino IDE are set for to run the CPU at only 2 megahertz, which is as far down as it goes. It normally runs at 180 megahertz. At 180 megahertz, it draws about 40 milliamps. Maybe 30. Spikes up to 40. It varies. It depends what it's doing at the time. So 30 to 40 milliamps just sitting there. At 2 megahertz, running this code so far, while it's waiting for an event, it's just polling the serial port over and over. It was idling at 18 milliamps. So now it's idling. It will idle at 15 milliamps, but only when you first turn it on and nothing has happened yet. So for some reason, even though I have a sleep instruction right at the beginning, it's like it's not doing that sleep, or that sleep isn't as effective as it usually is. It is better than without the instruction, so it's like the instruction had some effect, because normally it idles at about 18, 19 milliamps, and then spikes up to, 28 or so right while it's writing to this SD card. But, so now it idles at 14 3/4, so I don't know how that tells me that the sleep instruction did something, but didn't do very much. But now watch this. As soon as I go to actually use TS-DOS, as soon as I cause any actual activity, in the code, in the program, I have the sleep call is tied to activity on the TX pin for the serial port. So basically, if whenever the, I should have done it on the RX pin. I should do it on the receive pin. That was dumb. It's currently whenever the serial port transmit pin changes state, that's an interrupt that will wake up from sleep. So I have it basically setting everything up, setting up the SD card, and then going to sleep, and then waiting for anything to happen on the serial port. And then whenever anything happens on the serial port, that wakes it up, disables the sleep mode, and then it won't go back to sleep until it gets to the next time it runs the loop instruction. And then the next time there's any serial activity, it'll wake back up. So now that I just said that I have it tied to the transmit pin, I realize it should be tied to the RX pin. So maybe that'll help make it work better, because what you ideally want it to do is you want it to sleep until the until the Model 100 does something, right? So you should be watching for the receive pin, not the transmit pin. You're going to transmit in response, but you're going to sit there and wait for something to receive. So, but it's actually still working, sort of, because even with that mistake, and it as soon as I use it, like I'll hit F4 to load the directory of the drive, right? I'll have to get into TS-DOS here. Go into TS-DOS. All right, that's the RAM file system. As soon as I hit F4 to load the directory of the disk, that will cause activity. It will do some transactions with the Teensy, and then watch. Drops all the way down to 3.5, 3 1/3 milliamps. So I cannot get it to start off that way. No matter what I do, it won't. It's calling the same sleep call that it calls at the beginning of the loop instruction, and it starts off at the beginning of the loop instruction. I don't know why the second one works and all subsequent ones work, but the first one wouldn't work. So it's got to be something to do with it. Maybe just switching to the receive pin will actually fix it. I don't know. But although it's not ideal that it won't go into the lowest power just from power up, like if you just plug it in and turn it on and don't do anything, you would want it to sit there at its lowest power. But it at least does go down to an extremely low power draw as soon as you touch anything, right? If you just, like I just did, all I did is a directory listing, and it stays that way, and it works. Like, it's asleep now, right? 3 milliamps is nothing. So it's asleep now. I mean, it's not nothing. There's other low power devices that can idle, that will sleep at microamps, but whatever. It's a lot better than 30. So I can still, even though it's asleep right now, I can still use it just fine, right? I'll switch into a directory, and it'll just work. It won't even miss a beat. Ready? I hit enter. It woke up. It did the transfer. Oh, look at that. It didn't go all the way back down to 3 milliamps. It's back at 1475. I'll go back to the parent. See, it spikes to almost like 20 just while the SD card writing to the SD card draws a little more. So that's interesting. That it didn't always. Yeah, it's going to require some dinking around to get the low power working just right, because this is my very initial attempt at it. Go into a directory. I wonder if it's going to be like every other time, every other transaction. Back to the parent. Let's load another file. So now the file, I'm going to save it, transferring a file. Like, the meter almost doesn't have a chance to register the new draw. You know, it got up to like 6.5 milliamps, back down to 3 1/3. So that's just a start. That's a pretty good start. I mean, that's pretty good. So at 3 milliamps, any kind of battery is good. Like, even that little quadcopter, you know, drone tiny battery is fine, you know. And then with this module here, it would just charge. You just plug in the USB port and charge it up, and you know, you wouldn't have to remove it. But or it's very easy to just have an actual battery pack with removable batteries. Oh, I got the screw in there. It's not going to come apart. Sorry. Well, this is three AAA cells inside there. I didn't realize. I forgot I put the screw, the locking screw in place. So, you know, it plugs into the same spot. Although I wouldn't use this because I wouldn't want to try and charge these. So that's that. Teensy SD. Oh yeah, I'll put links. I'm gonna, in the comment on the video, I'll put links to where this code is and where the original code is that I based mine off of, because I butchered mine up somewhat, but the parts that matter are still all Jimmy Petit's. So this is my branch of it. His is here, right, which is this tangent delta SD2 TPDD. But mine is this other repo, and specifically in this branch, Teensy 36. My master branch on my repo is still untouched from his. It's still just the same as his. I did everything in this branch. So where did it go? There we go. Doing this. I'm doing this by looking through my phone. So and I'll put links to the Teensy, this serial module, although I think there's probably better choices. This is handy that it had the plug built in, but the fact that I had to solder those, well, I didn't have to. I mean, like I say, you could do it in the plug. Like if you're going to make your own cable with connectors instead of buying a pre-molded cable, you just do it in the connector easy. A lot of connectors already have it, actually. Yeah, that's that.